everybody to GZ Truth News. It is March 25th, 2023. Lots of updates as always. We have a very special guest, Dr. Jim Fetzer. Thank you very much for being on the show. What are the updates? It's lots of crazy things going on. We're all trying to do our best here. Lay it on us.
Well, I'm just delighted to be back. I've had a medical experience that put me partly out of action, but I'm pretty much back to full steam. So I'm delighted to join you again. But the latest from Ukraine is rather disturbing because it turns out Ukrainian special forces are getting military targets from CIA satellites. This makes the United States far more directly complicit in the war than before, and I do not believe this will go down with Vladimir Putin. Moreover, we have reports of NATO preparing the Ukrainian army for an offensive, that they've massed some 50,000 troops. This is to invade the Donbass and try to retake Crimea. It will not be successful. I predict it's going to require Russia to use some weapons it hasn't used before, not tactical nukes. I do not see that happening, but possibly these thermobaric weapons that are really enormously destructive. And believe me, the war in Ukraine is virtually over. This is a last gasp. This is a Hail Mary pass. The battle for Bakhmut has been decisive. Where Russia encircled, they left a way out. General Patton said one way he knew the Germans had lost the army was they were using carts to tote their dead. Well, in the case of Bakhmut, they're finding that the Ukrainian soldiers leaving the fields are old men and children who have been induced to fight on the lines where the average life expectancy is 4 hours. So this is horrific. All the claims being made about, Zelensky, Ukraine, back in freedom and democracy are, of course, all happy horse shit. None of it is remotely true. In fact, Ukraine has been the center of despotism and corruption in Europe for a very long time. No less a figure than Jacob Rothschild has declared Vladimir Putin to be an enemy of the New World Order, and, most importantly, that the New World Order cannot proceed without Ukraine. So, in my judgment, Putin has been fighting a war on behalf of all of humanity. The United States has so massively discredited itself, by the way, at this point in time. For example, one illustration, the Minsk Agreement, which even Angela Merkel acknowledged had never been a serious matter from the West, and it was giving an opportunity for NATO to arm up Ukraine, which is one of the reasons why it's taken as long as it has for Russia to predominate. It looks high, but that means, and when you combine it, for example, with the lies about the Nord Stream pipeline, where now even the president of Mexico is declaring that Washington has to come clean and answer questions about the pipeline sabotage. This is our neighbor to the south. The West has virtually no credibility whatsoever, and absolutely for a certainty, there's no possible way Russia could ever into an accord with the United States or NATO and have it taken seriously. We have discredited ourselves. We're not believable. We're world-class liars. We're phonies. We're hypocrites. We're liars. We're cheats. All of that is true of the United States today. This is very, very sad. And of course, we had the revelation by Seymour Hersh how the United States had carried out the Nord Stream with the assistance of Norway, and where it was done, where Biden was able to give a remote control order for the demolition to take place. Seymour Hersh did a good job of it, but even better is Mike Whitney on UNZ.com talking about the background, that there's been very great concern in the United States, especially about the growing relationship between Russia and Germany, which of course is the industrial powerhouse of the UK, and that there's a tremendous fear that with the Nord Stream 2, that Germany would benefit from all the cheap energy and natural resources from Russia, and it would power a new economic community in Europe with the United States on the outside looking in. That would become obvious that Russia did not pose a military threat to Europe, that NATO is antiquated and clearly dispensable. All of this is happening anyway in the aftermath of the Russian success in Ukraine. It's going to be obvious NATO is a meaningless organization. It's always been an offensive military arm of the United States, sad to say, where attacks such as in Libya, slaughtering Libya using NATO. Was Libya a threat to the security of the European community? Obviously not. This was engineered by Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State, slaughtering the Libyans. She was behind the Benghazi attack because the U.S. then became involved in trading arms, giving arms to bad guys, and the ambassador Stephen wasn't happy about it, and Hillary had him taken out. I mean, there's a whole lot of disgusting stuff that goes all along with it. Meanwhile, here in the United States, we have this Manhattan District Attorney trying to turn the old Stormy Daniels case that had already been settled. I mean, it was so bad that Stormy Daniels was ordered to pay $300,000 to Donald Trump for his legal fees. But you got this Manhattan DA, a guy named Bragg, Alvin Bragg, who's trying to make something out of nothing. There was a threat that Trump would be arrested. It became a very big deal. Jonathan Turley, among other experts, shredded the case, explained it had no substance whatsoever, that at worst it would have been a misdemeanor, that the statute of limitations had already run out. He was trying to convert a misdemeanor into a felony. And of course, as I've already mentioned, where the other judges had already determined it had no merit, well, it's fallen apart. So to try to save face, Bragg, the DA, is now claiming that Trump created the false expectation of arrest. I mean, this is such a joke. And of course, as many are aware, the International Criminal Court has issued an indictment against Vladimir Putin, allegedly for moving children out of Ukraine. But moving children out of Ukraine was indispensable. Ukraine was running factories of babies. They were organ harvesting. They were child sex trafficking. Putin moved children out of Ukraine, no doubt, but it was for their own safety and well-being. It turns out, by the way, that neither Russia nor Ukraine nor the United States have signed on to their International Criminal Court. But what we had going on here was the great Russian nationalist Vladimir Putin, who's not going to put up with any of this nonsense from NATO or the leaders of the European community, because it's the leaders who are at fault here, because the people themselves would have been perfectly happy to have cheap gas. Now they're going into a terrible winter. There's going to be a lot of deaths from it. There are a lot of protests going on in Europe, including now in France. And remember, historically, the French people have led uprisings against tyrannical government. So I find all this very auspicious, very promising, very important. But just as the international community is trying to demonize the great Russian nationalists, so the American elitist community is trying to demonize the great American nationalist, Donald Trump. I mean, it's reached the absurdity that the Babylon Bee is in publishing Trump to be indicted for removing mattress tag in 1997. I mean, it's about that bad. Listen to this. District Attorney Alvin Bragg reportedly set to indict Trump this coming Tuesday for the removal of a mattress tag back in 1997, according to sources. New evidence was discovered in the mattress tag cold cast by grizzled detective Harry Jakes, who utilized modern advances in forensic science to place former President Donald Trump at the scene of the crime. We got him dead to rights, said Bragg in an unnecessary press conference. No one removes a mattress tag in my city and gets away with it. By the way, I think those mattress tags really are only for the seller. Once you have your own mattress tag, I mean, the point is that anyone who's going to buy a mattress needs to know, the legitimacy of what's going on here. But it's also case that the Babylon Bee, which it makes brilliant points with satire, has been covering how the different media were reporting on the Trump investigation. Here's an example. New York Times. Here are 10 crimes we hope Trump may have committed. Washington Post. We hired a comic book artist to draw dramatic images of what a Trump arrest would look like. Fox. Yay, Trump might be indicted. Whoops, we mean no, that's bad. What is it you people want to hear again? Salon. I can't help but notice the DA is black and Trump is white, and maybe we could use this to start a race war. I mean, CNN, Trump crimes make Pearl Harbor look like a happy picnic. LA Times, how the charges against Trump are being fueled by climate change. InfoWars, Mexican president says Trump has been in jail for 34 years because of gay demon. Drudge Report, incitement, indictment, refinement, enlightenment. Associated Press, will Trump be indicted? Maybe. It's just become ridiculous. Meanwhile, a very interesting development in relation to the Senate, because Mitch McConnell has been an anti-Trumper all along, although he's not always made it clear to the public for his own political reasons, has been hospitalized after a fall that appears to have brought about brain damage. Now, one reason why I hold this man in contempt and would be glad if his Senate career were to end at this point in time, however much sympathy I might have for him for any medical maladies he's incurred, is that he was part and parcel of the coup of the 2020 election. And as we know now from further reports that have come forward, it turns out that the orchestrated insurrection, which was not an insurrection, there was no effort to overthrow the government, there was no incitement to insurrection by Donald Trump. Even the last two tweets he put out showed he's calling on everyone to be lawful, respect law and order, our valiant police. It was all orchestrated by the FBI, by the Capitol Police, where Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, but also Mike Pence and Mitch McConnell were deeply involved. Now, here's the key feature. It occurred and was timed to occur, and this was all deliberate and by design, exactly when motions were about to be introduced on the floor to pause the count of the electoral vote, to review the bidding of the submission of the slates of electors from the various states. This was timed such that at the very moment two different such motions were to be put on the floor, there was an interruption with a notification to Mike Pence, who was in charge, that there was this intrusion into the building, and they vacated. They took out Pence, McConnell, Pelosi, and Schumer, in the absence of which business could no longer be conducted. And when it was reconvened hours later, Nancy Pelosi was in charge, and they just went on under emergency conditions where past business was as though it did not exist, where those two motions to consider, the possibility of electoral theft, or that the wrong slate of electors had been submitted, were lost forever to history because they were never allowed to be introduced on the floor. It meant when the subsequent appeals went up to the United States Supreme Court, they had no legal basis. There must be a predicate, a basis in the past history of the event in order to be a foundation for this. Even if those motions had been voted down, that would have granted them the status before the Supreme Court, which under the circumstances denied for lack of standing, because those motions had never made the. This was the diabolical scheme to complete the coup, the theft of the election in 2020. And it's just shocking that Mike Pence and Mitch McConnell were just as profoundly involved in this scam, this violation of the Constitution, this deprivation of the rights of the American people to determine who is going to be in the government for the future of the United States by these anti-Trump individuals who are very worried because Trump represents a real threat to the status quo. He really has the potential to drain the swamp. He's introduced his Schedule F that gives him the legal opportunity to get rid of members of this permanent civil service bureaucracy. There's somewhere between 50,000 and more that have been invulnerable to removal, where Trump created and designed a master plan that would enable to fire them and really enable the administration to have control over the bureaucrats who are making the decisions and shaping the policies, completely independent of any American public interest. They were immune from votes, they were immune from being fired, they were immune from being influenced. Trump figured a way out. I believe this is one of the keys to why Pelosi, Schumer, but also Pence and McConnell were engaged in completing the coup. Everyone has to understand a coup d'etat took place in America before our very eyes, and January 6th was the way they managed to seal the deal. Meanwhile, research has been conducted on labor data showing a shocking drop in workplace attendance following the Vax campaign. It's absolutely stunning how seriously our workforce, and as a consequence, our GDP has been massively affected as a consequence of the pandemic and the measures that were taken, especially including the lockdowns. It's not a stretch to conclude from the data, the report says, that the vaccines are causing death, disabilities, and injuries due to a degradation of individuals' immune system. And this is a report by a fellow named Edward Dowd, who's doing completely brilliant work in this area. The rate of change is not explained by the long COVID trope. Ask yourself, where is funding for such studies? For the Cliff Note version, Dowd dropped the following Twitter thread summarizing his analysis. Edward Dowd, March 17th on Twitter. Conclusion. Taken in conjunction with the increase in disability rates since early 2021, which we've shown previously, we believe the most likely cause for the rise in both was due to the COVID-19 vaccines. In 2022, the absence rate was 11 sigmas above trend, and the work time loss rate in 2022 was some 13 sigma from trend. This is a very strong signal. Lost work time rates have grown substantially since 2019. In 2022, lost work time rates were 50% higher, an extraordinary change representing a large economic loss in productivity. For those who don't understand, sigmas are standard deviations. This normal deviation can tell you how rare 11 and 13 sigma events are. The right and left tails of the distribution are 3 sigmas. And there's more. As one commentator notes, data from the UK reveals firms are coming under increasing pressure due to rising staff sickness, particularly among those over the age of 40. Next week, Dowd adds, we'll reveal our estimates for the economic impact to the U.S. of the vaccines in 2022. The profits of Pfizer and Moderna are blood money. The vaccine damage report we're working on will tie together excess deaths, disabilities, work time loss due to chronic sickness. All started signaling multiple sigma events in 2021, concurring with mandates and vaccines. We are putting the puzzle pieces together. Very significant, very devastating. Meanwhile, there's an effort to try to revive gun control by talking about Uvalde and the mass shooting there, which, like the events at Sandy Hook, was a staged event. In fact, Uvalde was a virtually transparent variation. At Sandy Hook, we had that purported shooter shooting his mother and then going to the elementary school and shooting 20 first graders and 6 adults. Well, at Uvalde, they had the perp shooting his grandmother and then going to the school and shooting 19 second, third, and fourth graders. How ridiculous is that? And they're claiming it was all because that the police were stymied and were unable to move against him because he had an AR-15. Well, this is completely ridiculous. You go against the perp, however he may be armed, but they're doing everything they can. For example, the Daily Coast, which is a far-left publication, to make it out as though this is such a devastating weapon, the police had no idea what to do. Well, among the muck-ups that occurred at Uvalde, not to mention the many that occurred at Sandy Hook, they took what they thought was the most photogenic little girl by the name of Amory Garza, and they wanted to feature her just as Noah Posner and Emily Parker were featured at Sandy Hook because they were the most photogenic. And the blunder they had on different interviews on different networks, they had two different crisis actors feigned to be her father. And they were talking about her honor roll. And in both of the interviews, same honor roll. They had the same last name. They were both claiming to be her father. This is not a case that could be explained away by claiming one was the father and one was the stepfather, because the stepfather wouldn't have the same last name. Jim Stone was really good. Here's part of what he wrote about it. A massive screw up with the crisis actors. Two different crisis actor dads claim the same daughter with the same name and same honor roll certificate as their daughter. Both dads claiming the same last name, broadcast on two different networks. In the video, and there's a video that goes along with it, if they were dad and stepdad, then it would be daughter and stepdaughter. But they're both describing him as their daughter. They're both asserting they are his father. The video, thus, is a completely legitimate bust of the whole phony fraud. Two dads with the same last name, both calling her daughter. Bullshit. Busted. But that's not all that took place at Uvalde. We had the same teacher who died at Sandy Hook die a second time at Uvalde, this time under the name of Eva Morales, and I'm talking about Vicky Soto. She was just a fine young woman. You got a big article about her in Wikipedia if you want to check it out. There's no question but what it was the same crisis actor. And indeed, I'll tell you something that's utterly fascinating. Vicky Soto and Emily Parker, to wit, the crisis actors cast in those roles, have come out. They were on the BBC, of all places, on Thursday night, giving a report about how Sandy Hook was a charade, that it was a fake shooting. Vicky Soto was also apologizing for our participation in Uvalde. We have the further complication at Uvalde that Wayne Carver, who was a medical examiner who functioned as the glue to hold everything together at Sandy Hook, because, I mean, who would think the Connecticut State Medical Examiner would be a participant in an elaborate fraud? But he was. He's reported to be deceased, but we have him, and I'm 100% confident this is Wayne Carver, the very same guy, at Uvalde again. So this is very, very stunning stuff. It's fascinating that they have come out. They've been very courageous. Now, let me say, I know them through an intermediary who is my principal contact. The four of us have been working on how to reveal Sandy Hook to the public for over a year. They want out. They want their lives back. They were brought into it inadvertently. Emily Parker's real name is Margaret Cottle. She was very upset about the fact that her gravesite in Utah was buried with a Black American Girl doll in the gravesite. She was troubled by that, but also every other aspect, because she didn't want to continue to live a lie. Victoria Soto's actual name is Vicky Soto's real name is Victoria Aurelio. She is the daughter of the town clerk for Sandy Hook, and she too wants to regain her life back. They were on the BBC. It's a fascinating, complicated story. I reported on it on my BitChute channel, Jim Fetzer. I want everyone go to my BitChute channel, Jim Fetzer. You want to download this video. You want to share it as widely as you can because several things have happened. The girls were very ingenious. They were able to get video from the origins of the event at Sandy Hook when Eric Holder came to Newtown, and this was in 2006. Eric Holder came to Newtown in 2006 to solicit participations. The town of Newtown was paid $140 million to participate. They had auditions, they had contracts, they had non-disclosure agreements. Just as an aside, Vicky was paid $210,000 to reprise her role at Uvalde. The whole thing, we have it on tape. We have on tape the Connecticut State Police going up to the Sandy Hook Elementary School and blowing out the front window with a shotgun. The Connecticut State Police who are running the op behind the scene. We have a further video of Vicky and Margaret going to their grave sites and lampooning their burial there. There's another that Eric Holder is especially horrified, showing him snorting coke with Barack Obama in the background holding newspapers about Sandy Hook. I am very, very concerned that I was notified by our friend and intermediary, Steve, that Margaret called and told Steve that Eric Holder had the NSA pick them up. Eric Holder was upset because while he was aware of their desire to expose Sandy Hook, he wanted to limit it to Sandy Hook alone. She wasn't supposed to use the name Emily Parker. How you can explain this without using the name is beyond me. Vicky wasn't supposed to expose Uvalde. And Margaret was not supposed to say all of these school shootings are staged. A fascinating aspect of all of this, by the way, is that they had, during a very circuitous course of events, made a visit to Russia and actually met Vladimir Putin, who is very enthusiastic about Margaret. He likes her a lot. And they had arranged for him to call into the BBC and greet the British people, and Vladimir Putin called into the BBC to greet the British people. First time he's ever done anything like this. Eric Holder has somehow was able to block the broadcast of the BBC into the United States, but it went out worldwide. Steve has friends in Russia, one of whom is a world champion in mixed martial arts, knows Putin personally, listened to the show when it was broadcast all over Russia. The program ran an hour and 4 minutes. They had 107 calls in from all over the world. Obviously, they couldn't take all those calls, but they took a half a dozen or more. I'm trying to track down the MB3. And I'm reaching out to every one of you. If you have resources around the world, see if you can track down this extremely important interview. Eric Holder and Obama are trying to suppress it. Margaret told Steve that there was an article in the Washington Post about their appearance on the BBC, and that Eric had them stop the press and remove the story so it wouldn't get out. So here you have a fantastic development, blowing apart the whole phony narrative about these staged shootings, something on which I've done massive research, collaborative research, but where we've been planning for a year to bring about this expose. And unbeknownst to Steve or me, they wound up doing it via the BBC. These are huge developments, and I want everyone to know. Go to my BitChute channel, Jim Fetzer. Go to my Twitter, @Jim Fetzer. Go to my Facebook, Jim Fetzer or James Henry Fetzer. I've got it linked, all those locations. Download this video and share it as widely as you can.
100% agree. That is just amazing work, Jim. Wow. And that video can be found on your BitChute?
Yes, indeed. Actually, I've sent it to you. You can download it directly from your Skype, my friend.
Perfect, perfect. And I'll share that everywhere as well. And so, yeah, that's quite the bombshell. You have uh, the crisis actors coming on BBC and saying that this is all horrible.
Outing the event. Yeah, it's
Amazing.
fantastic. And you can see why they're desperate to bottle it up. And having arrested them, what does Eric Holder think he's going to do? I mean, there are a lot of parties here who need to know about this. It's such a humongous scam on the American people, but in fact, on the whole world. So I'm open to discussing this if others want to know more. But I'm very concerned for their well-being, though I cannot imagine what Eric Holder would do with Vicky Aurelio and Margaret Caudill of her speaking out and explaining their roles in the Sandy Hook scam. I've done so much on this. They went out of their way to bottle up my book, Nobody Died at Sandy Hook, where I brought together 13 experts, including 6 PhDs. Margaret has shared the book far and wide. Hundreds of people you wouldn't expect have actually read the book. They like the book because it's true, because there's no grandstanding and it's accurate. The 13 of us, including 6 PhDs, established a school had been closed by 2008. It turns out now it actually was closed in 2006, that there were no teachers or students there, and that it was a 2-day FEMA drill presented as mass murder to promote gun control. One of the contributors to the book, by the way, Paul Preston, who himself had been, as a school administrator, instrumental in state, active shooter drills, was so troubled by what he saw being broadcast from Newtown that day that he reached out to his contacts in the Obama Department of Education, all of whom confirmed to him it had been a drill, that no children had been harmed, and it was done to promote gun control. So he's known from a long time. And this is why they brought a lawsuit against me to take the book away from me, and even to secure my blog, where I had so much information about Sandy Hook right at the time of the Alex Jones trial, because they were going to pillory me during the hearings in the court, which Robert Barnes, who's a very astute guy, has been in the courtroom and said it didn't look normal to him. They had 3 cameras set up, including one on the jury, and it looked to him like a made-for-TV movie. So when they attacked me as a batshit crazy conspiracy theorist guy, nobody could go to my blog, nobody could get the book to see what I had to say about Sandy Hook. I'm still in the courts today, by the way, to get back the book, which I want to make available. And Margaret was talking about a new book we're planning about all of the events I'm describing here before you today. So let that come to pass.
Incredible. Amazing. Well, of all the crazy things that have been going on, I have to say that this is a great blow. This is a great thing for the good guys. It's a great victory. And, as soon as this is done, we're going to share it everywhere and do our best to get everybody on board. And when people wake up and learn what's going on, it's really incredible. So thank you.
Absolutely. Now, bear in mind, they're doing their best to bury it. They're trying to destroy the audio. Anyone who has access to it, if you know anyone in Russia or elsewhere in the world, anyone who can come up with a copy of this, get it to you, get it to me. We're going to make sure it goes everywhere, because the whole world deserves to know the truth.
Thank you for these amazing updates, Jim. Very appreciated. We hope to hear from you more. And we can't wait to take it, see the end of it all here. And
my great pleasure. My great pleasure, always.
Thank you. All right. Well, take care and talk soon.
You got it.